cosmic consciousness, extraterrestrials and UFOs, sacred geometry, ancient civilizations, spiritual connection, the quantum universe. All of these topics and so much more with your host, Seb Tuck, on Alien Spirit with Sev.
Hello, welcome to Alien Spirit. I'm Sev. My guest today is in high demand, Michael Schratt. He is a private pilot, a military aerospace historian, an author, a speaker, a TV commentator. He's appeared on many TV shows, including Ancient Aliens. His book, Dark Files, A Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and Obscure UFO Encounters, is available on Amazon. In an effort to expose government fraud, waste, and abuse, Michael devotes much of his free time to gathering secret information to uncover and present to us. These are just a few of the cases Michael has investigated, and he'll talk about them. The 1946 saucer retrieval at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, the 1947 amazing discovery at Berkeley University, the 1955 top secret warehouse of UFO parts at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, the 1963 Marine who guarded a UFO for 2 weeks, and he has some new cases too, including the alleged Jackie Gleason 1973 ET encounter at Homestead Air Force Base. Michael believes it is our constitutional obligation to question authority and demand an accounting of special access programs that bypass congressional oversight. Welcome, Michael Schratt.
Hello, Sam. How are you? Good to be with you.
Good to be with you too. I'm really grateful that you're with us today. I'm seeing you all over the place. We first met at a MUFON International Symposium a couple years ago when I was the Master of Ceremonies, and I introduced you. And I sat and I listened to your talk, and I was blown away.
Oh,
it was
really?
My favorite one. Yes, I really enjoyed it. So I'm very excited to have you.
Nice.
I know you have a lot of stories, and you also have a lot of visuals. But first, I'd like to begin with asking you where you grew up and what were you interested in as a young man?
Sure. I grew up in the Chicago, and it's great to be with you. I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and my whole entire life has centered around aviation aerospace. My dad used to take me to a place called Victory Air Museum in Mundelein, Illinois. And what they had there were a whole bunch of decrepit, old, left for dead World War II warbirds just sitting out in an open field. So you can picture there was tall grass growing up through the wheel wells, and all the paint was chipped, and the windshields were cracked, and the skins were oxidized, and the flight controls had like skeleton because all the fabric had rotted away. And these old birds sitting out in this lonely field just had this ghostly appeal to me, and that's what sparked my interest in aviation, and I never gave it up.
And you became a pilot?
I became a pilot, and then, basically I've always had an interest in super secret aircraft, the kind of aircraft that go bump in the night, that kind of aircraft where they're paid for by our tax dollars but have no congressional oversight, no public scrutiny. That's kind of my big passion. But then, of course, I started researching historical UFO cases over at QFOS, which is Center for UFO Studies. That was 2457 West Peterson Avenue, not too far from downtown Chicago. And over a period of about 2 years, I went through every one of their cases. That's literally 50,000 cases. They have multiple file cabinets. So I'd get there on a Sunday afternoon. I'd start opening up the file cabinets, and these things were packed so tight, you couldn't put a razor blade between the manila folders. So it was an actual operation, taking the folder out, looking at it. If it had a 3-page report, and if it had a flight path and a detailed sketch, I copied it. I used that as a guide or template to do a full color rendering, and then I generated an AutoCAD drawing. And so I wanted to take these old, dusty historical cases,
Wow.
bring them up to modern standards. And then, of course, that kind of led me into the Leonard Stringfield research that talked about the bodies, the debris, and the craft. And I hope to get into those cases today with you.
Oh, we would love to hear about them. Okay, shall we start, Michael?
Yes, we can start.
Would you like to share your screen now?
Okay, I will share my screen here.
If you're ready, I'm going to do it. Oh, what happened? It's gone.
Share screen, window here, share.
Okay, there we go.
Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, and I want to make sure that this thing, hopefully it'll be.
You want it big like that?
Large on your side. Okay, good. Yep, hopefully that works. So the title of this lecture is Retrievals of the Third Kind, Cosmic Crashes, Corpses, and Cover-Ups. And we're going to go through this because we've got a lot of material to cover here. Now, UFO Crash Retrieval is the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. Why is it the ultimate holy grail of research? We've recently had congressional hearings, and the reason why it's the ultimate holy grail is because the crash retrieval cases contain the debris, the bodies, and the craft all wrapped up into one entity. So what I'm saying is that this is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. Anything less than this, anything less than the physical hardware, all of us within this field as a global united group here, we're all going to be here another 50 years spinning our wheels, and we still won't know what's going on. That's why the crash retrievals are at the very top of the chain of command on disclosure. This is going to be what drives it all home here. All right, a couple of quick announcements. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. Number 2, the identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. Number 3, the visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches which originated from the specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So in other words, what I'm saying here is I never claimed to be an expert in AI image generation. I can only do the best I can. So we'll keep that in mind here. Now, where did Leonard get his information? What were his sources? Okay. 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists, and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, police, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So you can see a broad cross-section of first-hand military witnesses that had first experience dealing with the bodies in the craft. These are the people that we want on our team here. A couple of quick quotes. UFO crash retrievals can't be real because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. That's number 1. Number 2, there are not now nor ever have been any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright Patterson Air Force Base. This is their official press release. This is not my statement. This is the actual United States Air Force press release, July 1980. So what we're saying here is we're going to take Leonard Stringfield's 119 crash retrieval witnesses, and we're going to go up against the United States Air Force, and we're going to analyze and see who comes out top here. UFO crash retrieval expert Leonard Stringfield. So I want to introduce everybody. This is the man of the hour. Over a period of about 30 years, he collected dozens and dozens of these first-hand sources. People who loaded the craft and shipped them to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. People who read the pathologist report. People who went to Walter Reed Hospital. People who went to Eglin Air Force Base at the underground cold storage vaults where they keep bodies. That's the type of people that Leonard had dealt with here. All right, a couple of bio points on Leonard. Born in 1920, he grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he had already memorized the entire dictionary. So what we're saying here is This is the perfect guy to take all these accounts down. This is the guy that we want on our team here. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. After the war, he was employed by a chemical company in Ohio and retired after 30 years. He wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957, Situation Red, the UFO Siege back in 1977. Now this next one, this is what we want to drill down on here. His lecture on UFO Crash Retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. And it did cause an international sensation because back in 78, Roswell was just coming onto the radar screen at that time. And this whole concept of UFO Crash Retrievals, which he coined the term, was a new entity back then. And the agreement that Leonard made with his firsthand military witnesses is that he would be allowed to preserve an important part of our national history by telling their accounts, but their names had to be kept under wraps. And so there was this pushback when he gave his lecture at 78 MUFON Symposium, right down the road from Wright Patterson Air Force Base, where all this was going on. There was pushback because the audience, he would not release the names. So there was no way for people to independently verify what Leonard was talking about here. So it's understandable. There was pushback. He passed away December 18th, 1994. Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. It says, author continues quest for truth about UFOs. What I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. And it would be. It absolutely would be the biggest thing, because even if one of these cases are true, it's going to be a huge event here. Also want to mention that Leonard maintained a collection of 22 bank boxes of original correspondence letters, drawings, audio tapes, and testimony from his sources. These witnesses should be located and their testimony should be presented before Congress. That needs to happen like yesterday. Almost 20 years ago, this needed to happen. Okay, now next thing is, I want to highlight this book. So if anyone wants to follow along with these crash retrieval cases when this gets published, you can get a copy of this book, UFO Crash Retrievals, The Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7 by Leonard Stringfield. And as you go through this publication, and I'm going to give you the names, I'm going to give you the dates, I'm going to give you the times, the locations, so that you can follow along where I'm getting all this information. As you start reading this publication, what you're going to find out is that this is very text intense. You have to be someone that is passionate about crash retrievals to even get through this book, because it's very text intense. You know, it's talking about where the bodies were sent, and it's talking about the autopsy reports, and it's got reports from the x-ray technicians. It's very detail oriented. However, I will warn everyone that it is devoid of drawings, sketches, illustrations, full color 3D renderings. It's completely devoid of any of that. So what you're ending up having to do here is you got to make up in your own mind's eye imagination what these crash retrieval cases look like, which is technically not a bad thing, because we all have our own interpretations of what these things might look like. But for me personally, I wanted to put a picture to every single one of these cases as much as I possibly could. So over the past 4 years, it's been my crusade to preserve an important part of our national history by going through each case with a fine-tooth comb, picking out the mission-critical cases, committing them to professionally drawn, refined drawings, using that as a guide, and we're going to go to the full-color renderings. And that's, Seb, what I hope to present to you today here. That's the goal.
Yeah, and you do it so well. Okay, I'm excited. Yeah, you really do.
Checks in the mail. Checks in the mail. Okay, let's continue here. Okay, also want to highlight Magic Eyes Only by Ryan Wood, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. This is something that he published about 20 years ago. This updated version includes 104 additional crash retrieval cases. So we've got a lot of meat on the bones here. Now, before we start getting into all this, I want to take you to Las Vegas, okay? Now, if we went to Las Vegas and there was a roulette wheel that had 120 spaces on it, and we bet 119 chips, we can't lose, right? We're going to win every time. We almost cannot lose. So what I'm saying here is all we need is one of these cases to be authentic, and the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals non-existence completely falls apart because the odds are in our favor. It's 119 to 1 in our favor. We can't lose. I mean, we're all on the top here. So again, it's going to be Leonard Stringfield's witnesses against the United States Air Force. I want to give credit to Rudy Gardea, who is my sketch artist, who really helped me get these things drawn here. So let's start it with the first one. This is UFO Crash Retrieval 1942 at an Army base north of Georgia that Leonard didn't even know about. This is UFO Crash Retrievals, page 319 in the book. So I want to give you the page number on all of these that will give you all of the intricate details of each case. Now, this thing was about 15 feet in diameter, 10 feet high. There were 3 levels. The upper level, which you can see on Rudy's bubble blow up here, had a display panel. It had buttons and switches on it. So that was the upper level on the upper right. Now, the mid deck had what looked like a wraparound window. In back of that wraparound window were what looked like 4 bar stools. The bottom level had an entryway hatch. So that's levels 1 through 3. Now, also want to mention that there were 4 crew members taken alive. They were 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin. Now, wrapped around the outer circumference of the lower portion of the craft were what looked like these hieroglyphic type writings. And this is something that I've got about 4 other cases within the Stringfield collection that has these writings. Now I'm going to go to the next slide just to give you an idea here of what this thing may have looked like if we can commit this to a full color rendering. So this is just a guide to give us some kind of visual aid. Now, if you look on the left side of the craft, you can see this hull breach. So when this thing came down, and it augured in at a little bit of an angle here, it pierced the skin of this craft and it left this shrapnel that you see on the left-hand side. So let's continue on. And again, you can see this bubble section on the right with the display panel on the upper deck. And on the mid deck, you've got the wraparound windows and the 4 bar stools. This is what's talked about within the eyewitness report. So we can do a blow up here of these hieroglyphic type symbols. And what I'm thinking when I'm looking at this case is that there has to be, by default, a transnational team of engineers and linguistic experts that are cataloging these symbols, that are trying to interpret what they mean. There has to be, by definition, a group doing this. There absolutely has to be here. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. There's 2 sources. One was an avionics mechanic and his son, Tex Martin. He was 6 years old at the time. So we've got 2 eyewitnesses on this case. UFO Crash Retrievals, page 242 and 243 in the book. Now, I want to mention that back in 1946, it was still known as Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. It had not become Wright Patterson Air Force Base until October 1947, when the U.S. Air Force became a separate entity of the military. So it was still known as Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. What you're looking at here is a period correct photograph of hangar complex number 4. I don't know if this event took place in this complex. I can't prove it, but I think it did. I think it did. Let's go to the next slide. Now, the 6-year-old boy accompanied his father because he was getting good grades. Now, connected to the main hangar that I just showed you was a connecting cafeteria. And there was a janitor inside there. And he noticed this 6-year-old boy. He seemed like a nice kid. And so this janitor decided to buy a soda pop for the 6-year-old boy. And so we've got a period correct vending machine here just to get the thing set up here. Now, just as he was handing this soda pop to the 6-year-old boy, one of the military personnel in the main hangar walked through this doorway, and this 6-year-old boy and his father, I will mention, so we got 2 witnesses here. He looked through this doorway, and what did he see? Here's the little 6-year-old boy. He's looking through the doorway, and we're roughing this out. These are all their preliminary sketches. to get this whole case set up here. He sees two 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. That's number one. Number two, he saw about an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft propped up on tripod landing gear. On the far side, he said that there were three what looked like ET humanoid bodies laying on the hangar floor, partially covered up with blankets. And he's looking at all this. He can't believe it. So what we want to do now is go to the next slide. We're going to reverse the viewing perspective so that we can see more of the scene. And if you look back here, you can see our six-year-old boy here. He's shocked and amazed. He can't believe what he's looking at here. But you can see the elements are laid out here. We've got the dish-shaped craft. This is all in rough sketch form. We've got the two tractor trailers. We've got the tarps. We've got the chains. We've got the bodies on the hangar floor, just laying out where everything goes. Now, Seb, I want to take you to our final drawing here, and this is what we came up with here. This thing was 20 feet in diameter. It was off-white in color. There were two rings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. You can see the bodies in the left foreground. We've got the tractor trailers, and then our 6-year-old boy, Tex Martin, is peeking through the doorway at the back of the hangar here. So this is just important to lay the monuments out and preserve this important part of our national history. So we want to take this as a guide and go to the full color rendering. And this is what we came up with here, just to give everyone an idea of what it may have looked like if we were back at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio in 1946, and we were looking at this in real time here. Okay, next one. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. So essentially same time, same place. Primary source was a private. He worked in records management. The publication on this book, the reference is, and I will divert from Stringfield one time and one time only. This is Clark McClellan's book called Space, the Final Frontier, page 59. Within this book, and I'm going to go to the cover here. This is what the cover of the book looks like. Space, the Final Frontier by Clark McClellan. There is this sketch. So this is from a private in records management at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Now, he had a friend who was an MP, and this MP said, you know what, I got something I want to show you. So he brought him inside the hangar, and when he got there, there was a 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. This is his original sketch. It was 7 feet tall. It had a highly polished mirror aluminum reflective exterior. There were no rivets. There were no seams. There were no welds. There were no socket head cap screws. There were no hex head cap screws. This thing had a series of rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Looking through the windows, it was antiseptically sterile, and this entire craft came to Wright Field by a railroad flat car that came from Arkansas. That's how it got here. I'm going to go to the next slide here. This is my AutoCAD drawing that kind of cleans things up. Now, if you look on the upper right detail view, what I've done is I've cut back the skin. I've allowed you to show the interior of the craft. And on the forward front view here, there is a 3-foot diameter central column that went from the bottom of the center of the craft right through the midpoint and terminated at the ceiling. Now, if you look at the window just left of center, there was a red dot. This is the attempted point of entry where lab coat technicians were desperately trying to pierce the hull of this craft with a diamond tip drill bit. Like they were desperate to do this. I've got 3 other cases within my files that also talk about these diamond tip drill bits. So this is not unprecedented. This is something that has a common denominator that runs through a lot of these cases. Let's go to the next slide here. This was my preschool level first pass color illustration, just to give everyone an idea of what this craft may have looked like if we were there. Let's go to the next slide. Here is Joseph Brace full color rendering. He's also peeled back the skin. Now this shows you what the interior column looks like. He's even got the red dot on the window just left of center. So this is where they were literally trying to drill into this thing. And the report said that they failed to do it. They could not get inside this craft. So let's go to Rudy's drawing here. And now you can kind of see the layout here. So you've got the MP, you've got the private records management. The report said that there was a tarp partially folded up to the right of the craft. In the foreground, according to the report, was an open toolbox with an electric drill and a diamond tip drill bit inside the drill. And so that's the guide that we want to use as a template. And we'll go on to the next slide. And now we'll go to the full color rendering. And this is the best we could come up with just to give everyone an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there back in 1946, just to make these cases come alive here. So next one, who would have a need to know? So we want to look at this letter, September 23rd, 1947. This is Nathan F. Twining, who is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio base commander, to Air Force General George Shulgin. And here he says, quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." As you go further down under this document, it talks about the flight path characteristics. It talks about the form, fit, and function of the craft. So this would be a gentleman who probably was in the know when all this was going on here. That's what the documents tell us. Next one, Papagos Indian Reservation west of Globe, Arizona. This is January 1947. So we're already 3 in, and we haven't even got to Roswell yet. So we're already 3 in here. North of Superstition Mountains. The witness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. So that's who we're talking about here. In the book, it's page 93, case A10. So we're going to go to the next slide here, and we'll set this up. So we've got our primary eyewitness is with another associate. They're driving down an unimproved road not too far from the Superstition Mountains, and they are stopped by MPs, by security guards with arms, and they're told to get out of the area immediately. They're not supposed to be here, but they were at the right place at the right time in the midst of this retrieval operation going on. So another 100 feet down the road off to the left is this 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, about 18 feet high. It had a low-rise dome on top. There was a series of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. There were 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference, and they're looking at all this. They're shocked at what they're seeing. They're told to get out of here immediately, which they did, but it is in the report. So we're going to use this as a template to go to our full color rendering. And this is what we came up with to make this case come alive back in Arizona, not too far from the Superstition Mountains. Okay, let's continue on here. So beside the craft and beside the bodies, I also have a side project. I like to track down what happened to the hardware. What happened to the debris? Where did all this stuff end up here? Well, we've got 1-page reference within the Stringfield dictation notes that talked about debris being sent to something called Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. And that's what we want to talk about now here. So according to Mr. Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. The road to success. And this is what they do. It makes gears as large as 21 foot in diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So bottom line here is if the U.S. Army retrieves something and they didn't quite know what it was, but it looked like it was a part of a gear and it had some teeth on it, where would you want to send it to? Well, you'd want to send it to a company just like this because they've got a lot of years of experience. You can see the size of the gear, how large they are, how small they can make them. I'm going to go to the next slide here. This is back in 1909. This is what this company was making back in 1909. So yes, it checks out. It's verified. You would want to send something to these guys because they're experts at it. They're probably the world's expert. Here is 1923, the purchasing agent, May 1923, just to give a size comparison on the level of technology involved in making these gears. So yes, if there was a defense contractor, if the government wanted to figure out a reverse engineering program, they would take the debris to this company to try to figure out and analyze what this thing actually is here. White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. Primary witness was a technical sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196 in Leonard's book. So we'll go to Rudy's drawing here. Now, I want to mention that this all took place at night, and the primary eyewitness, he was here. He saw the entire operation. I also want to mention that the entire scene was excruciatingly well lit up. They had light-alls shining on this thing. They had spotlights shining on this thing. They had searchlights shining on this. This was very well lit up. They also had people with Geiger counters walking around this thing, looking for radiation. Off to the right, there were personnel taking still camera photographs of this thing. They had people with motion picture film reel cameras going on. There was talk of biologics recovered because there was medical personnel in tents off to the right. So in a nutshell, that's what this thing looked like, about 150 feet in diameter. So this was not a small craft. This was a large craft. So we'll go to the next color slide here, just to give an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there back in 1947 at White Sands at the upper section of the range itself. So what's the actionable item here? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. Now, herein lies a problem, because number one, senators and congressmen don't have the high enough security clearance to get access to this information. And number two is they have never been read in or briefed on these programs. So how can they declassify something that they've never even been briefed on? They don't have a high enough security clearance. That's this brick wall we're running into at these congressional hearings. And that's why it is really important and incumbent upon us to track down these remaining legacy witnesses that could hopefully appear before open congressional hearings, and we can get to their bosses, which will eventually get to the debris and the bodies. That's the goal in all of this here. All right, next one. UFO Crash Retrieval, seen in all places, a warehouse in Berkeley University. We've got the name on this guy, Albert Bruce Collins. He's long since deceased now, but he was a metallurgical engineer, and this is page 197 in Leonard's book. So here we got the site picture. We've got this metallurgical engineer. He's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck backs into a warehouse at Berkeley University, and he's looking at all this. So let's go to the drawing, and this shows you what this thing actually looks like. This was an egg-shaped craft, about 30 feet across, 15 feet high. He said it had a hull breach on the side of it. It literally looked like a cracked egg. There was a 3-foot diameter central core or yoke in the center of this thing. In the forward part of the craft itself, there was a composite panel. There was another composite panel that wrapped around the outer circumference of the interior core or yoke. And then he mentioned that there was what looked like debris and shrapnel coming out of the right bottom of the craft. So we believe that there was an internal implosion and that caused this shrapnel and debris coming out of the bottom right. So what we want to do is use Rudy's drawing as a guide and template. We'll go to the full color rendering here. And this is what we came up with here at Berkeley University. Now, it could still be there now. Who knows? But they cannot claim that they don't have any physical evidence. So when we hear all this talk about we don't have any physical evidence and the Air Force says we've got no body and debris, well, we're already 7 in. We've already talked about this. The body count's going up. The craft count goes up. So there's no excuse for them not to know other than the fact that they don't have a high enough security clearance. Okay, next one. Carrot Patch, south of Salina, California, July, August 1947. 2 primary eyewitnesses were 19-year-old workers. I mean, these were young guys at the time, and this is part of the strict dictation notes by Leonard Stringfield. Now, to set this up, and this is the original sketch that came with the report. The craft came down the night before. The foreman found out about this. The next morning, he alerted his two 19-year-old workers, and they walk over. They're looking at this thing. This thing is about 9 feet in diameter. It's got a flat top. It's 4 feet high. It has a double row of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference of it. And on this case, not only do we have the original sketch, we also have a map. So X marks the spot. So I could technically probably take you, if we could go back in time, I could take you plus or minus 200 feet where this thing came down, and there might still be some debris there. Not anymore, but when they've originally had this event took place, there might have been something left over. Now, back to the story here. Here's the craft itself. This is my AutoCAD drawing. One of these guys got up enough guts to go up to this thing, and he kicked the side of this thing. He actually kicked the side of it. Here was my first child kindergarten rendering, just to give an idea of what this thing actually looks like. And then I'm going to take you to Rudy's drawing, and this shows you now this convoy of military vehicles shows up. So no sooner than 5 minutes when the two 19-year-old boys arrive at the scene, this one guy, he kicks the side of it. 5 minutes later, a military convoy of vehicles show up with at least 2 Jeeps. There were military personnel. There were security guards basically cordoning off the area. The 2 boys are told to get out of this area immediately. There was a 6x6 troop transport towing a trailer. Both 19-year-old boys witnessed the military personnel manhandle this craft up onto the back of the trailer, cover it with a tarp, and they were out of there. So this is a rapid response mobile retrieval operation. And I'm going to go to the next slide, which is our best effort to make a photorealistic color rendering of this case. And this is what we came up with. If we could be back here in California, just to give an idea of what this may have looked like. And that's the goal in all of these things, is to preserve our history. We've paid for these things. We've paid for the reverse engineering. We've paid for the black projects that worked on these programs. These have no congressional oversight, no public scrutiny. This is the crown jewels of the United States government. And I will also add that the subject of UFOs in general, but specifically UFO crash retrievals, was classified higher than the atomic bomb during World War II. And that's why you have Timothy Good's book called Above Top Secret. That's where he got the title of his book, because this was classified above top secret. We're going to the next one here. Danny Sheehan. I want to give him credit for this case. He's a friend of mine. For people who don't know, he obtained degrees from Harvard University and Harvard Law School. As you know, he is a large advocate for UFO disclosure and transparency. So anyone within this field knows about Danny Sheehan. Well, he's a good friend of mine. I heard about a case that he was involved in, and I said, Danny, I'm very interested in your case, and it deserves the attention that it needs. It deserves a drawing and a rendering. So, of course, we started talking about this, okay? And what he said, and this is according to Danny Sheehan, verified in multiple interviews here. In 1977, Danny was given a special security clearance to investigate classified files at the Library of Congress. Go to the next slide. These were the classified files specifically associated with Project Blue Book. These files are not to be confused with the unclassified Project Blue Book records, which have long since been declassified and sent to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The photos were accessed by Danny Sheehan at the Madison Building basement during January of 1977 under the direction of the Congressional Science and Technology Committee and Marcia Smith at the Congressional Research Service. So that's just setting up how he got involved in all this and how he got access to the material. Now, where are the classified Project Blue Book files now? That's the $64 million question that we all need to answer here, okay? Now, within the jurisdiction of the Library of Congress is the James Madison Memorial Building, and that's where all this took place. So I'm going to go to the next slide to give you a top view looking down now. You've got the United States Capitol. If you go directly to the right, you'll see the Library of Congress. below the Library of Congress is the Madison Memorial Building. That's where we want to focus in on. Now, according to Danny, he went into an elevator. He dropped down to the basement. Elevator doors open up. He walks down a large corridor where he's met with 2 security guards. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. And this shows you the basement layout now. So now we're in the basement. We've gone down this corridor. He is stopped by the guards, and they're expecting him. It's all on the up and up. They check his ID and his credentials, and yep, this is the right guy. They lead him into another room where what he sees is a microfilm reader. Off to the right of the microfilm reader is this mobile dolly. If you've ever been to university archives, they always have these mobile dollies where they have these cardboard boxes that are secured by a string, and then there were some documents. And so Danny's thinking, you know, I don't have a lot of time to look through all this stuff. I got to get going on all this. So what he started doing is he opened up these cardboard boxes where they had these microfilm reels, and I'm going to go to the microfilm reels. He started loading these microfilm reels into the microfilm reader, and this is what we have here, a period correct microfilm reader. And so he's stringing everything in here. He's feeding it. He turns on the projector, and it projects an image down onto this glass plate here, this white plate. And he's scrolling through this microfilm reel. And all of a sudden, to his shock, he comes across 3 photographs that depict a winter scene. Now, in the winter scene was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that was tipped up at a 30-degree angle. It had a low-rise dome on top. Written along the bottom circumference of the upper dome was a series of hieroglyphic-type markings. Now, again, this is a winter scene. Now, when this thing augured in, it left a debris trail off to the right and then off to the left. Off to the right, the craft was tipped up at an angle, and there was a buildup of dirt where it came to rest. He also mentioned that there were 3 military personnel all wearing winter parkas. They had their hoods up with that furry flange around the hood. That's what he said, where they were all taking photographs. There was a 4th man wearing the same parka. He had a shoulder-mounted dual-reel motion picture film camera, and he was photographing the entire scene. And Danny's just shocked at what he's seeing here. Now, he knew that his time was very limited. There was no way he was going to get through all these reels. So what he did is he took his legal notepad that you see in the upper right here, this photograph on this slide. He paged through all the pages to the very back of the cardboard backing. He overlaid that cardboard backing onto this white flat plate here, and then projected the image of the hieroglyphic type writing directly onto the back of the cardboard. And he proceeded to trace the outline 1-to-1 at full scale wrapped around the outer circumference. And so what you're looking at here on the bottom right is his napkin drawing that he did for me personally of what these markings look like that were written along the bottom of the circumference of this thing. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, what did it look like? Now, I also want to mention that as he's leaving, he's checked the security guards check him again. They look at his ID. They clear him to go. He starts to walk away. And one of these security guards said, "Oh, wait a minute, hold up. Come back here." So he had to walk back there. And the guy said, "What's that?" And Danny said, "Well, that's just my legal notepad." And he says, "I need to see that." And so this security guard starts paging through all of these blank pages. He never got to the last backing of the cardboard. And so this guard handed this pad back off to Danny. He walked out the facility, and they never knew about it. So that's how he got to the information. So what did the whole thing look like? That's what we want to look at. So we started the process here. So if you look on the bottom section, this is the napkin sketch that Danny had drawn for me. And he was sitting right next to me when he did this. And so I had my friend Rudy, who's my artist. We started sketching this thing out, going back and forth. This took 3 weeks to pin all this down here. And I want to kind of take you through the process here. So these are the details of what the photograph looked like. The craft measured approximately 30 feet in diameter. It was tipped up at an angle of about 30 degrees. It had a dome on top with these strange markings on it. It left a debris trail on the ground and created a mound off to the right where it came to rest. The photo depicted 4 men wearing winter parkas. We talked about that. 3 of the guys had cameras. The 4th guy had a motion picture film camera. Now, I don't know where this took place. Danny didn't tell me, and he didn't know. And I don't know when this took place. But my best guess, based on looking at the period correct motion picture still camera, I believe it took place between 1948 and 1961. That's my best possible guess. So let's continue on here. This is what these winter parkas look like. You've got the furry flange on top. All 4 men were wearing this. Next slide. 3 of the guys were carrying these period correct still cameras. So that's something that checked out. A 4th man off to the far left, he had a shoulder mounted dual reel motion picture film camera. So what I've got here is a period correct camera with the tripod. So just picture the tripod not being a part of this, and then you've got the scene here. So again, this is a blow up of the markings from Danny. I'm going to go to the next slide. This shows you one of the artists that I work with. He cleaned up these markings here just to give you a little bit cleaner identification of what those look like. So now I want to take you through the entire refining process here. Here was the early preliminary rough sketch, just getting things laid out here. We've got the disc-shaped craft, we've got the tip-up angle, we've got the 4 people in place. Go to the next slide. Now you can see this built-up pile of debris off to the right. We've got the disc-shaped craft. We're roughing in some of the symbols. The 4 men are in place. I'll go to the next slide. This is a direct side view. So now you see the craft tipped up at a 45-degree angle. Probably could come down about 10 degrees or so. We've got the dome on top, and we've got the people in place here. Now, this was one of our kind of final rough renderings. And when I showed this to Danny, he said, well, you've got the concept right, but you've got the orientation incorrect. And this went on for a week to try to figure out what Danny was telling us. And then it kind of dawned on me what he was saying is we needed to take the entire scene and rotate it counterclockwise almost 180 degrees. And this is getting to that rotation. This is almost a direct side view. You can kind of see these symbols are coming much more into view here. And if we keep on rotating, we're going to end up with this drawing. And so when I showed this to Danny, he says, yes, now that is the correct configuration. We need to tip this thing down about 15 degrees, and then you will have it. I'm going to take you to our finalized, refined drawing. And according to Danny, this is the most accurate drawing that you're going to see with respect to actually seeing the authentic photograph. So this is about the best we're going to get here. I can't do any better. Rudy can't do any better. This is about the best we're going to get. So it incorporates all the criteria. So we've got the snow, we've got the men, we've got the parkas, we've got the disc-shaped craft, we've got the tip-up angle, and we've got the dome with the marking. So it's satisfying all the criteria here. Now, I couldn't end it there. I wanted to see if I could take this whole thing to the next level here. And I put out a contest, a $100 cash prize for the first person to accurately, photorealistically depict this thing in real time, like we were really there. First person who does that gets $100. I'm not going to go through all the criteria, but we already talked about it. It had to have all these things on it: the tip-up angle, the people, the furry flange, the cameras. They all had to be here. Now, I had entries from all around the country. I had entries from all around the world. People sent in things. They sent in afterward. They sent in things. So I want to take you through about the top 4 here. So before we begin with that part, I want to state that there is a theoretical limit to what results you can achieve by typing prompts into an AI image generator. You still need the human touch. So bottom line is AI is still not there yet. There's got to be a human brain inputting things into a computer. You cannot just type on a keyboard until the cars come home. You're still not going to get what you need. You need a human brain creativity to get exactly what you're looking for. So what it ends up being is, and this is what we found out, is that number one, you can use AI to generate a really nice background. That works out fine. Then you use something like Unreal, or you use like something like 3D Studio Max to generate a one-to-one craft that is to scale. And then you finish up with Photoshop. So what in point of fact we end up with here is a hybrid illustration. I'm going to go to what we ended up with here. So this is one of the entries here by Sean Leahan, which did a good job. I mean, it's a winter scene. The parkas are in place. He's got the camera people. He's got the markings. It's a good attempt. Let's go to the next one here. This is
Michael.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We have about 3 minutes.
Yep. We're gonna wrap this up with the last one here. So this is Ben Lewis. You can see he's got the craft in the correct configuration. We've got the cameras in there. He's got the dome on top. This was my winner by Skylar Stallings. He won the $100 cash prize.
Yeah,
and
that's
I thought he was about as close as we're going to get because he's got the people in place. He's got the dish-shaped craft. He did a good job on the snow. This was definitely a winter scene. He's got the symbols there. I had one more entry. This was by Dan, and you can see he's got a real good photorealism here. So what I'm trying to say is this is about the theoretical limit of what we're going to achieve with current technology, really to make this photorealistic, to make this come alive. And the bottom line of this presentation here, and I'm glad that we could be with you, is that we wanted to preserve this important part of our national history. It is our national history. From the use of detailed renderings and drawings and sketches that are based from these original witnesses. And really, it's up to us, because we're long since past the Undertaker now, because a lot of these legacy witnesses have passed away. We've got to track these people down so that we can get open congressional hearings, and that these witnesses can come together as a united coalition that will actually take us to the physical evidence and the hardware. And I want to thank you for being with me today.
That was superb. I want more. It's not enough.
Oh, yeah.
But it's so much information, but I just still want more.
Sure.
The way you tell the story is really good, and the graphic illustrations are just so excellent. You know, did you read Lou's new book, Imminent?
I have his book. I'm not done with it yet.
Yeah, well, he says that Roswell really happened.
Right.
And so there is evidence, and it is out there. But Michael,
Sure.
why are people still ignoring it?
Well, that's the thing. Now, you know that the giggle factor has come down now since 2017. This is more palatable, but there still is a giggle factor. But, you know, ultimately, we will win this race, because there's nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer. And we've got people all around the world that are ready for this, despite what the government says. And eventually we will follow through to completion.
You think it's going to be civilian-led?
You know, we've been in this game for 80 years now. We've tried the democratic process to disclosure, and the United States government has failed us. So what that means is, in point of fact, it's now up to us to track down the remaining legacy witnesses.
All right. How optimistic are you that we're going to see the kind of truth that we're hoping for in your lifetime?
Well, you know that people a lot more powerful than me have come and gone on this, and they will stop at nothing to keep this under wraps, because it's a multi-billion dollar. It's a multi-billion dollar thing. Exactly. Because
have you been bothered?
I have not bothered, because the way this game is played is they don't care what you know, they care what you can prove. That's, you know, you're welcome to do whatever you want. You can go to university libraries, you can go check things out. Right. Until you get physical hardware, now you're on their radar screen. That's how this works. There's a game going on here, and that's how this game works.
So if you have physical hardware, watch out. They're going to knock on your door.
Perhaps, yes. Perhaps.
Oh, or other things. All right. Michael, how can people get a hold of you? Where are you going to be next? How can we see you?
Sure. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X. I have a YouTube channel called Michael Schratt. Just type in my name. My channel will pop up. As you mentioned in the beginning, I have a book called Dark Files, a pictorial history of lost, forgotten, and obscure UFO encounters. It's available on Amazon. And, I'm just a concerned taxpayer like all of us should be. I want to know where our tax dollars disappeared. And this is at the heart of all of it here.
Thank you, Michael Schratt. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We're so grateful.